Okay. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you for attending today's afternoon training as we're going to do a live demonstration as part of the Hybrid Resources Phase 2C RIMS project. For this training, again, it is going to be a live demonstration. I have Matt Denny on the phone with me, and he's going to be walking us through a few things today as far as creating a shapefile, as well as going through RIMS and submitting some of those documents that we talked about in our previous training that we had in March. And then we're also going to look at some validations that the RIMS system has. So we'll go through and look at some errors that you could have, as well as some successes. So we'll successfully submit a project with you today on the phone. As well as you'll see that we are recording this presentation. So for folks who are unable to join or joined a little bit later, we'll be sending out this recording to folks on the call, as well as posting it on our training center. You'll see linked here. And then I'll also send out a communication to users who are also not on the call with this link as well. So this training is a little bit different as far as question and answer. So we are going to be going through like start to finish for the most part, going through the web form, creating that shapefile, like I said. So we want to stop on a slide or a section and make sure that we answer questions in the moment. So in order to be successful, it'll be helpful if you can use the raised hand icon, and that'll indicate to me that you have a question in the moment on the section that we're on. I'll kindly interrupt Matt and we'll ask that question so we don't miss anything, as well as if you have a question and it's in the chat, depending on if we're able to answer it in that moment, I might stop as well and read that question to Matt, and we can go from there. So again, a little bit more informal, asking questions in the moment, making sure we catch them as we're going through, just because it is that start to finish type of project. So with that being said, I am going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to pass it over to Matt, who's going to be doing the walkthrough for us today. So Matt, I'll pass it to you.
All right, thanks, Dottie. So, hello everybody, I am Matt Denny, part of the short-term forecasting group at the ISO. So I do a lot of the document review for the forecasting documents for new resources, and I have done a lot of the testing for these upcoming hybrid 2C changes. And so today I'll be walking you through an example of creating a shapefile and filling out the web form in RIMS, and then submitting all of that, and kind of getting through that step of the process. One kind of note before we get started on who this kind of affects. So the new web form and shapefile submissions will be required for new resources, new CAISO resources that have a solar or wind component. So that includes hybrid resources as well as single and co-located resources. Those will be the types of resources that will be submitting these files through RIMS. And so the first kind of thing that I'm going to walk through is creating a shapefile. And for that creation of the shapefile, I will be following one of our readiness notes that was on the sample kind of creation of the shapefile. I will be following these steps kind of step by step and going through that. And the first one is downloading the templates. So I have these downloaded already, but these are CSV templates that we'll need to use for creating the shapefile. And for today, I have a newly created kind of sample resource in RIMS, and I just have some dummy coordinates that I'll be using as our corners, met station, and turbines, and we'll be walking through how to put those in a shapefile and then how to fill out the web form for that new resource. So first thing when creating the shapefile is we want to fill out these CSV templates. So I'm just going to copy and paste in all of these coordinates from this little notepad into the CSV. And generally, I would say best or kind of standard practice is like 6 decimal points on the latitude, longitudes. We don't have a kind of a set standard, but I would say that 6 decimal points is good as far as how much precision you get from that. So that's what I'll be entering in for all of these. And there we go. And then we'll want to just save that off somewhere. So I'll save that off. Let's do that off screen. The naming convention for these CSV templates isn't super important. You can name them kind of whatever you want to name them, since we're just going to be importing them into our GIS software, and then we'll be renaming things after that. So that's the project coordinates done. So we'll close that sheet. And then worth noting, the example resource we'll be going through today will be a wind resource, or will it be a hybrid resource with a wind component. So we'll have some turbine coordinates that we'll need to enter as part of that. And so for this, I'll just say my turbine ID is 1 and 2, and we'll say elevation and height are 10 and 20. And then my latitude and longitude, just copy and pasting in from those dummy coordinates that I showed earlier. And we want to fill out all these fields for each turbine that you have, and then save that off as well. Oops. That. To save that off, so do that on my other screen, so I don't show all my files. But I'm just saving them kind of to a desktop location, and I've kind of been naming them with the project ID in the title, but as I mentioned earlier, it doesn't have to be a rigid format for this document. Some of the documents that we'll actually be submitting into RIMS, we will kind of be required to follow some naming conventions. So then for the met stations, again, just copy and pasting those coordinates in, and we'll have our met station IDs be 1 and 2. And then we'll save that off. Okay. And now we have all of our CSV templates saved off. Just going to close those out. And now we can kind of get into the GIS software. So for our purposes, we use QGIS, and that is kind of the software that we have outlined in the steps in that readiness note. Any GIS software can be used for creating the shapefile as long as it has the correct file formats that are specified in that readiness note, and has all the coordinates that match what's in the web form. But for today and for our purposes, we will be showing off this process in QGIS, which is open source and free, so it should be available for use. All right, so in QGIS, I will just create a new project, and then from here, we want to add a new layer, and then we want a delimited text layer, and then in file name, I will find one of our CSVs. So there we go, our project coordinates CSV. This can be done in any order. And then we'll want to make sure, X is longitude, Y is latitude, and then WGS 84 here. And then these are both decimal doubles. So don't have to change anything here. That all looks good. And we'll click add. And then that adds it to our map. And then we'll do the same thing for our met station coordinates. Again, don't have to change anything here. You just click add. And then one more, our turbine info and click add. There we go. So now we have all of that added to our map. So we can see our met stations here in this yellowish color, our coordinates here in this rectangle, and our 2 turbines. So that's good. And from here, we want to kind of export these layers and make them readable for, or kind of get them ready for submission into RIMS. So start with the project coordinates. What we want to do is go to export and then save feature as. And then here we want to make sure our format is S3 shapefile. And then our file name, we will this one we'll want to follow a specific format for this file naming convention, which is outlined in that readiness note. So it's the project key, and then since this was project coordinates, and then if you are entering this for a single resource, then that's all you need. But if this is for a hybrid where you have a component ID, then you'll want an underscore and then the component ID. And then save that off. And then WGS84 here, S3 shapefile here, so that should be good. You can click OK. And that's our project coordinates saved off. And next we'll do our met station coordinates, doing a similar thing, export, save as. And then similar kind of naming convention here, project ID, met station coordinates, and then underscore component ID. And then click OK. And so that's our project coordinates and our met station is done. And then we'll want to do the same thing for our turbine info. And just a note, when you're entering these file names, if you kind of tried to do something here and click OK, it would give you an error. You want to make sure that you're just specifying a location within your desktop for this to save off successfully. And then for this one, project ID underscore turbine info. And then again, since this is a hybrid, it's the component ID, which is just wind1, since this is the one kind of wind component for this hybrid, and then click OK. Okay. And so now we've successfully saved off all of the information that we need for the shapefile. And if we go into our files, what we'll see is where we saved all of that off. We have a bunch of different files for each, turbine info, met station coordinates. We have a bunch of different files within each category. And so for submission into RIMS, we want to kind of make this into one nice file. So what we're going to do is zip this all up. And I'm actually going to intentionally forget to zip part of this up. We'll leave this DBF and CPG out, and we'll show later the kind of validation that we run into. But if you're not trying to mess things up, which I will show off a bit later, you want to select every single file that was created from that and then add it to a new zip file. And then that new zip file, we want to, again, follow the naming convention, which is a bit different for this. This will look a little bit more familiar for kind of the naming convention that you've been following for document submissions for site info and such, with the addition of the component. So project ID and then space, shape file, and then space. If you have a component ID, the component ID, and then space ver1. Okay, and And now with that, we have created our shapefile, and we've zipped it all up. For now, we've forgotten this to see the validation that that runs into. But if you're not trying to run into that validation, just zip up every single file that gets generated from exporting those three CSVs. And then we'll have our shapefile ready. And now we can go into RIMS. And so this is our stage environment for RIMS. And I've just created a test project that we'll be able to go into and modify the information within this. You can see we have a wind component and a battery component to this new KAISO hybrid resource. And before we submit our shapefile, we'll want to fill out our SDF info. And so this is a new section. Before, we had you submit the site info in an Excel document, and now we are moving that to a web form, which should kind of make things a little bit easier and also helps us get the data in a more kind of standardized format. And so this is what the new web form looks like. And so we'll just want to fill out every single field here. Every field in the web form is required, so we'll have to fill out it all. So we have our park potential megawatts, how much megawatts our resource can produce, and then when you edit that, you'll want to click validate there just to save that off, and then our coordinates. And so for our corner coordinates, we have a validation here, which is that we need to submit at least 4 corner coordinates. We cannot have less than 4, and that's an Appendix Q requirement. And so I'm just going to enter in my coordinates one by one from those same coordinates that I was entering in for the shapefile. Again, you want to make sure that what you're entering here is going to match what's in the shapefile, because there are validations that check between the two. And each time you enter in a coordinate, you just want to click that save button on the left. And hopefully it'll save off. There we go. Should be a little bit quicker when we move to production. In stage, it's just a little bit slower because it's a less powerful environment. But yeah, each time we enter a coordinate, I want to click save. And, that was a lot quicker that time. And then just enter in the next one. And to try to show off that validation, I'm just going to stop at 3 corners. And then we'll run into an issue later when we try to submit this. And then our capacity information, our nameplate capacity of the wind component, and then the megawatts for the POI. And so these pieces of information, they may end up being the exact same. The reason that we kind of ask for these points is we've had kind of feedback from our forecast service providers to get a little bit more information on the capacity of a resource and making sure that if a resource is overbuilt, that we have that information ahead of time. And so asking for these pieces of information just helps us get a better kind of idea of how forecasting the site should go. So that's why we're asking for that. And then next section are met station information. So this will be pretty similar to the corner coordinates. So we have our met station ID and then our lat long. I forgot to mention earlier, these lat long, they have a validation here where it's only numbers that are able to be input into the lat long. And each field should have those same kind of validations where if we want a number, then the number is required. And so enter in that information for our first met station. And then we have our second met station. 10 for this as well. And so we want to make sure that these kind of, the lat longs are different for our like corners and met stations, generally speaking. And then for the met equipment information, so this is a bit of a new ask. It's kind of, we were asking for this information in the site info sheet, but it was a bit cumbersome, the spot that it was in the site info sheet, where it kind of didn't have a lot of room for the specifics of kind of what met station model and make and all that you were using. And so this is kind of asking for the same information that's asked for in the site info sheet right now, but just asked in a kind of more granular fashion. And so these fields are all strings, and so we can just enter in, maybe left 222 or something like that. I see a raised hand.
Matt? Yes, so we do have a raised hand. If you want to come off mute, say your name, your organization, and your question.
This is Saad Syed from Ocean Winds. My question is, can you allow for these fields to be imported using a CSV, right? Because if you have 100 turbines, right, like having to enter these manually will be very cumbersome. Or is it already allowed? I missed some portion of the presentation in the beginning, so let me know.
I don't believe that we have an import at the moment. I mean, that's a feedback piece I can take back to the IT team, but at the moment we don't have the ability to import from a CSV within this.
Perfect. And I don't see any other hands raised, I believe, at this time. And also, I'll write down questions and feedback from this training, and we'll make sure to capture it and share with the internal team. So thank you for that. Back to you, Matt.
All right, thank you. So yeah, the Met equipment information, these are kind of text fields that also allow like hyphens and such. And so for something like this, if you do have like, maybe you have some kind of Met station that's like all in one and that covers your wind speed, wind direction, it's fine to kind of enter in the same thing for like each single one, if that kind of describes your situation. This is just a text field. There isn't validations on this. This is just kind of purely informational for us to make sure to get the information about kind of what equipment that is in use and making sure that it fits in the accuracy requirement in Appendix Q. So that's kind of why we have asked for all this information. And so, yeah, just enter in whatever you're using, and if there's some scenario where maybe this would be more of a solar thing, maybe where you're not required to provide something like back panel temperature, then you could just provide like an NA in this field, and that works as well. And then in this, we also have this remote sensing tools field, and this is just a yes, no with LiDAR or SODAR. There is one requirement here, which is we do allow LiDAR or SODAR to be used as a Met station, but we do not allow it to be used as the only Met station. And so here, if you enter LiDAR and try to make that a primary and save it off, you will get this validation back. And so this can be used as a secondary Met station in addition to another Met station. So we'll save that off as not a primary. Oops, saved it off twice. Delete one of those. And then enter in another one. And say it's just the same thing for all these guys. And then say this is not LiDAR or SODAR, and this is the primary. And then we can save that off. And then we have our wind turbine information. And this should be basically matching exactly what is currently asked for in the site info sheet. So the make, the model, the number of turbines, and all of that. So these make and model fields are just free text fields, so you can enter in text there. Number of turbines is a numeric field. Generation capacity is a numeric field. This is a numeric field. These cut in and out speeds are numeric as well. And then this is yes or no for cold and hot weather package. And then more cut out other speed information, and then click save there. And yeah, that saved off. And then we have our turbines. So this is, again, we want to make sure that we're entering in the same information for the web form that we did in the shapefile. Just making sure that those coordinates match between the two. That's our first turbine. That'll save off. Second turbine, and for this one, I'm just going to modify this. This is the coordinate that we have in the site, in the shapefile, but I'm just going to change this a bit, and we'll see the validation that we run into in a bit when we submit that shapefile. So now we filled out all the forms, or all the fields rather, so we can click the save button. And now you can see that validation that I mentioned earlier. Our corner coordinates, we need to have at least 4. And so click add, and we will add that 4th coordinate. There we go. And then we can click save, and we can see that saved successfully. And so now you can leave and you can kind of exit that. And because you click save successfully, you will see that that data is now saved off, and you can still modify this after you saved it off until you submit, then it'll become read-only. So now we have the web form filled out, and we can now upload that shapefile that we created earlier. Oh, whoops, sorry. I'm going to choose the file, and then this shapefile. You click upload, and as mentioned, we should run into some issues here because I set it up to run into a few issues. So I'll show what that validation looks like. So this would be sent to whoever's submitting this file, that this shapefile doesn't contain the CBG and DBF files, and those were the 2 files that I kind of intentionally didn't include earlier, and so we can solve that issue by just zipping up all the files, not missing one this time. Do that. There. And I'll get rid of this zip file. And then rename this one. We want to make sure that we're following the naming convention here. So again, project ID, shapefile, then our component ID, and then for 1. And then we can go to upload project files and upload that corrected shapefile, and we should run into another issue. upload. Again, we run into another validation since I entered a different coordinate than was in the web form. There we go. And you can see here, if this happens where you have a coordinate mismatch, you'll get an email that says the turbine info does not match what's available in the RIM system. And so now, because of that, we know that we have a mismatch in the turbine coordinates. And so if this happened and you weren't kind of sure what you did, you could check the CSV templates between, check between the CSV templates that you use for the shapefile and what's in the web form to make sure that those are the same. Or you could even go into this shapefile. So the DBF file is one of the files that we kind of validate against. And so you could open it up in something like Notepad++, and it's a bit of a weird one to look at, but you can look at these coordinates and see that they are matching between what you have in the web form and what you have in the shapefile. And for this one, we entered in a different longitude for this coordinate. One thing to note is like for these DBF files, they have like a little bit of margin of error, but when we are doing that validation between the web form and the shapefile, there is kind of an embedded like threshold that it has to clear before it would throw an error. So something like this where it's 10 decimal places, it's not checking up to 10 decimal places. So this wouldn't cause any issues compared to this coordinate. These two would be the exact same, but this coordinate certainly does not match this coordinate. And so we'll want to change that in the web form and correct that coordinate that we intentionally entered in incorrectly earlier and correct that to match what's in the shapefile. And that's now modified. We can click save again just to be sure. Exit that. And then we can try again to upload our shapefile. And now we see file successfully uploaded. So that passed the validations. We didn't have any issues. So now we have our shapefile uploaded. Now, before we can submit our web form, we want to make sure that we have all of the documents that we need uploaded. And so that is the shapefile, and for a WIN, that's also the topo map. For a solar resource, you would have the topo map and possibly the sharing agreement if your solar resource is sharing. But for this resource, we just need a topo map. And so what I'm going to do for that, a topo map can be a docx or it can be a PDF. And as a reminder, it should be a map. But just for the purposes of this demonstration, I'm just going to open this up and save off a PDF. That doesn't have a map in it, but there's no kind of validations that we run on no automatic validations that we run on the topo map. That's just a document that the forecasting team opens and makes sure that it looks okay and is meeting all the requirements in Appendix Q. And so for this one, this should be familiar. Nothing's changing with the topo map, other than now you have the additional component ID if you are a hybrid resource. For one, save that off as a PDF. And now we can go back to our resource and upload a project file and upload our topo map. Upload. And now we have successfully uploaded our topo map. So we have our shapefile, we have our topo map. This isn't a solar resource, so we don't need a sharing agreement. And so now we have all the pieces of all the forecasting documents, and so we can click the Submit button. And we have everything. It passed all the validations. There were no issues, and so you can see STF forms submitted for review. And then if you scroll up in the bucket notes, there should be a note that's left there. I think it might still be loading that, but you should be able to see that STF info was submitted successfully. And then from there, the STF team will go in, there it is, submitted for review, and then it'll be submitted to the STF team, who will then review and accept or approve or not approve. And if we not approved for any reason, then you would get an email kind of following the process that we have now. You would get an email specifying the reason for us not approving, and you could edit anything. So I guess one thing to mention is when you have submitted, submit is now grayed out. And if you view, then this information is now read-only. And if the STF team comes in and accepts, then this will stay as read-only, and you'll be kind of through the process. And then if we not approve, then you'll get an email with the reason that we not approved, and then you'll be able to edit this again and then submit for another time. And so that's the process. Hopefully that was helpful, kind of covering the shapefile creation and upload, and then the new web form. So any questions on any of what we went over?
So as a reminder, if you have a question, you can use that raised hand icon, and that's going to indicate to us that you'd like to verbally ask a question, or you can throw it in the chat and we can address it that way. So I'm not seeing any hands raised at this time, Matt. I think we are good to wrap up from today's live demonstration. Again, as a reminder, we are recording this session. Once it's done and uploaded, we'll upload it to our training center. I'll send out a communication and you'll have that. And I did just see a couple hands raised. So Chen Yu, if you wanted to come off mute and ask your question.
I think Alina is going to ask the question for us. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Go ahead, Alina. And you might be on mute if you're asking your question.
I can probably ask the question, Daddy. This is Chen Yu from PG&E. Yes, okay. We're just chatting as whether we will still really appreciate Kaiso having this session to walk us through. And we wonder, it does have a lot of steps. And is that a user guide as well to basically follow step to step, just like what Matt just walked us through?
Yes, we will be updating the user guide. So we have a RIMS user guide, and then there's a new resource implementation quick start guide. And so we'll be going through and updating that. And once it is updated, we'll send that communication out, and you'll see those changes in those user guides when it goes into production. That's when we'll publish them.
I see. Okay. So around maybe May 15-ish, when it goes to production,
yes.
We shall see the communication. Thank you, Daddy. And thank you, Matt.
Of course. Thank you. Okay, perfect. If folks have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to us. You can use the customerreadiness@kaiso.com. I'll also be sending out an email tomorrow with the presentation that we kind of went over, as well as the link to this recording, so you have it. And again, thank you so much for your time and your questions. Have a good day, everyone.